It was terrible. We had smokers on both sides. So, it was everywhere. We had to keep our windows closed, even if it was a really hot day, because if you opened the windows, it was just basically like a vacuum. It would suck the smoke right in. The door opens right into the living room. So if you open the front door, which of course you have to, the smoke just comes in, you know. And on a hot day, you had to make a choice. Did you want to live in a sweltering apartment, or did you want to open the windows and let a bunch of smoke in? So even with the windows closed, though, my kids were exposed to cigarette smoke when we opened the door to go to the park or go to the school. Um, so yeah, that was basically what our life was like for a couple of years. And so, we just kind of felt like our apartment was a bit of a trap. We had to spend as much time away from our home as we could. So
I started getting a couple phone calls from two residents in particular regarding their newborns and smoke getting into their apartment from a smoker around them. We weren't sure how it was getting in, but it was coming into their apartment, and you could obviously smell it when you walked in.
What a neighbor chooses to do if it is smoking really has an impact on the health of all their neighbors. And children, by virtue of their size, their exposure and the ramifications on a developing body, on developing brain, on developing pulmonary tissue has more harsh consequences over time. And so that's why this legislation is so important, really, from a pediatric child healthcare perspective.
There's a common misconception that condos should be treated differently than apartments. So let me tell you a story. There was a man who came to a city council asking for help. He was recovering from prostate cancer. In his situation, he lives in a condominium right next to two people who work from home. The two people who work from home smoke like chimneys. They're there 24/7. And to make matters worse, on the other side of the smokers are a family with 5 small children. He pled his case. One of the council members just couldn't wrap his head around the idea that he should be able to regulate condominiums. He's operating under the misconception that public health is any different in condos than it is in townhouses or apartments.
A smoking ordinance, as it affects multiple unit housing, really is about public health and safety. And that is our moral responsibility as electeds.
City of Centerville did include multi-housing in our smoking ordinance, primarily for 3 reasons. We were concerned about health hazards associated with secondhand smoke. We were also concerned about fire that's oftentimes associated and in some cases fatalities associated with smoking, people falling asleep and therefore causing a dangerous situation for them and their neighbors. And then finally 3, because of the waste associated with cigarette butts being tossed about and therefore creating some clutter for our city.
I think the instigation was some emails and some letters that we received from people who live in a high-density senior living facility in Belmont. They had recently had a fire that was started by a cigarette, and a lot of these people were displaced, and they just were tired of the smoking situation in their building. They had to suffer with it every day, and they wanted the city to make smoking a public nuisance in their building, that people who lived in a multifamily, multi-story building should have the right to tell their neighbors that they're being bothered by their smoke.
The health of the community, the public health and welfare of the surrounding members around an individual supersedes an individual's rights to smoke. Smoking-related fires are some of the most tragic stories that we read about in the news, and my community in Richmond has been rocked with horrible, horrible stories of children trapped in fires. And it's not just children who died from burns, but really from inhalation injuries. And we've learned that children succumb to smoke inhalation morbidity and mortality much quicker than adults do.
Well, like many things in life in terms of the impact of smoking-related fires in multi-unit residences, you can do everything right. And if your neighbor doesn't, it can threaten your livelihood and your property. Cigarettes don't know when you're asleep. And so anything, just like unattended cooking, a cigarette left unattended, if you do fall asleep, can have catastrophic, consequences. One of the reasons is because you're so close to the source of the fire and where it can have such a significant impact.
In some cases, individuals have gone to bed, smoke, and then fall asleep, and you can well imagine what the consequence might be, including, for us in San Rafael, California, a fatality.
What comes to mind is a horrific, tragic story that still stays with me when I hear about smoking-related fires. And several years ago in Richmond, mid-morning, we had a horrific fire that claimed the lives of 3 children, and apparently an unextinguished cigarette set the fire, and 3 children were trapped inside, and adults were able to get out, but the children were not able to get out. And the older sibling was found dead over the bodies of her 2 little siblings in the hopes of trying to save their lives and protect them from the smoke and inhalation that ultimately caused their deaths. And the firefighters from Richmond that were involved in that so rocked their community when they discovered the bodies of these 3 children, and the word got out, and there was a huge community effort to raise money for these children's funerals because they were in lower income housing, and I'll never forget that. And the last heroic efforts of really a defenseless child hoping to protect the lives of her 2 little siblings. It's a story I'll never forget.
Well, I think really any city council or township community should consider passing an ordinance that restricts smoking in multi-unit housing. Over the years, we've seen countless examples of firefighters responding to tragedy. It's well documented. And to think that we've got an opportunity to help prevent some of that from occurring in the future, and again, it's non-discriminatory. It occurs everywhere. So no one's immune from this. Why should we wait until the next tragedy occurs to enact something? Do something proactively and really take some action now, because the life that's saved may be your own.